That bell, let's start the show. Happy Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. Welcome to Wrestling Chat with Friends, our Tuesday WWE show. I am EJ the Collector. I am joined, as always, by the genius of the ground, the ultimate warrior, the rock to my sock, TG. How you feeling?
I feel great. How are you?
Good to see you. And we are welcoming back Kelsey. She had an amazing debut last week. And we're going to keep her around. We're going to bring her on hopefully every week to talk wrestling with us. Kelsey, you look great. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, feeling great.
Good to see you. Kelsey can be seen on Graybo's channel on the Drip app where she breaks wax and auction stacks and does all that. And I got to be on there last night. Kelsey, I want to say right off the gate, you went like 2 hours, 45 minutes, no break last night. And you're not just like talking, you are running the auction, you are clicking, you are typing, you are talking, you are posting, you're interacting. I felt like I had run a marathon just watching it. So kudos to you for putting that on. Like, how do you keep up for that? Like, I know you're doing a lot of learning too about these cards and stuff, but like, wow, you really go above and beyond on your show.
Yeah, I think it makes it easy when it's a topic that you love. So I think just the 2 hours goes by fast and I don't even know it. So
for sure. Well,
yeah.
I'm just saying you handle it all, but if you ever need like a little admin assistant gopher next to you, I can stack packs. I can talk wrestling. So we'll have to get on that. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We are proudly part of the Family Podcast Network. Catch us on YouTube, Facebook, and mostly on our Twitter page, WCWF Pod. Cheats, my mentor, our producer, is behind the glass tonight. Cheats has definitely scolded us because he says we do too much wrestling belt talk on this show. So we're not going to talk any title belts tonight. We're just going to show them off real quick. We're just going to show off what we have for Cheats. Yeah, Cheats might be Cheats 2 belts, but I'm EJ 3 belts over here. So there you go. Cheats, that's for you. Lots of belts here. I'm in the market for an IWGP US heavyweight title replica that Will Ospreay now holds. But let's get into it. We are a week away from Money in the Bank, live from the O2 Arena.
Are you sure?
I am sure now because I definitely kind of went most of last week thinking it was this past Saturday. We give our predictions. We'll keep our predictions in stone unless anyone wants to change them. But what I kind of want to talk about out of the gate. Oh, I also want to mention this. Kelsey's back for her second week. If you didn't see our talk with her last week, go back and watch it. Kelsey is a professional wrestler. She's a graduate of the Nightmare Academy. She is getting her career off the ground. She's going to be hitting the pavement this summer, getting herself on shows, and we're going to be following that journey with her. So definitely go back and see Kelsey's debut last week. She was great, and now she's here with us full time. Okay, This is a WWE show. However, here is the topic that I want to kind of get off and talk about. I will say, after watching SmackDown and Raw and watching Collision and the pay-per-view that AEW had on Sunday, Forbidden Door, I don't think we're in a time since AEW's inception where we have seen a bigger contrast between how the two largest wrestling promotions in this country present themselves. And I want to kind of open that up to you guys if you guys agree with that, feel that. I will say, it's no secret. WWE is an entertainment program that is, to this point, sort of anecdotally about wrestling, where AEW is very much a professional wrestling show, which, because it's putting itself out to a wide audience, is incorporating storylines, which is part of wrestling, but they are far more focused on professional wrestling. So I'd say to you guys, and we're going to start with TG, if you're a professional wrestling fan, there's too much tribalism in wrestling anyway, especially right now with social media and everything. But if you're a wrestling fan and have been one for years and years and years, why is one maybe more still a WWE fan over an AEW fan when AEW is clearly the wrestling company?
Well, I think, for me personally, I think that professional wrestling is a really interesting athletic art form. But for me as a fan, it exists as a means to an end, which is to enhance storytelling. And that storytelling can be in the ring, that storytelling can be outside the ring. So for me personally, what I like about WWE and why I prefer it is that as someone who is in it for the stories, if you were to say to me off the top of your head, how many active storylines or developing storylines can you name that are on WWE programming, I could probably come up with, without even trying, probably 10 to 12. I would be hard pressed to get past 3 or 4 on the AEW side. And so for me, as someone who is more interested, I think, in the story aspect of it, sort of the wrestling is, I don't want to say it's subordinate to the story, but it is, again, a means to an end, whereas the stories themselves are what really attract me to a television show. So I think, to answer your question, I sort of approach this from a fan standpoint in the same way that I approach another TV show. And if the week-to-week storytelling is good, then I'm going to be into it. I think that one challenge that AEW has, and I think you're right, I think we've never seen the contrast more highlighted than we do right now. And part of that is because Forbidden Door is such a one-off endeavor that it highlights the sort of that difference, because you're not really building week-to-week stories for more than a couple of weeks before the show, and you're not really building things that in many cases are going to live on beyond the pay-per-view Sunday night. And because of that contrast, I think that the challenge AEW faces is that they are absolutely dedicated to putting on the best in-ring product they can on any given show. And I think that that's great if you're a fan of in-ring action, no question about that. The problem is they have 3 TV shows a week. And without that connective tissue of the story that is going to be that sinew that connects all the different shows, I think it becomes more difficult. One of the reasons that I was excited about the potential of the soft brand split is that it does allow you to sort of say, okay, we're going to have one Collision show a week and one, Dynamite show a week, and not have to worry about like, okay, we're doing 3 of these a week and we have to keep all these plates spinning. It's much easier to sort of the WWE approach, which is you get one bite at the apple a week, if I can mix those metaphors, which I think makes it easier to do week-to-week storytelling. So for me, as a fan of storytelling in general, that's what appeals to me about WWE.
Kelsey, what I'm hoping to get from your perspective is you are a trained wrestler. So I'm curious, sort of, as you consume professional wrestling on sports, on TV, on television, and over digital media, I want to know kind of in the beginning, what about the Attitude Era in WWE first attracted you? I mean, you said last week it was a bond with your brothers, which is important, but on the TV, was it the characters? Was it the collision of bodies in the ring? Was it the move set? And as you were trained, during your training, how was it at all, if at all, communicated to you about storytelling versus the physical aspect of it?
Yeah, so as far as the physical aspect of storytelling, matches are a story as well. So you don't only have your story, which can go on for days, months, years, whatever it may be, but you first learn with your match, because your match itself tells a story. So stories to me, with WWE or WWF and Attitude Era, that's really what we were looking for. We wanted to know what happened next, who's winning the pay-per-view. So that is something that definitely reeled us back in and wanting more. Also seeing, the wrestlers and move around, and that's my type of thing. And so that and the combination of the story is definitely what kept me into watching WWF at the time.
I mean, just never before have I just sat there and gone, wow, I don't think they're even trying to compete with one another. I think they're really operating under two completely different business plans at this point. And I guess depending on what kind of fan you are, like, as I've said a lot of times, I grew up primarily on NWA, and then WCW was sort of my preferred product, which had storylines too. And TG, I want to kind of you think you can rattle off a dozen different storylines with WWE? I think some of the chatter lately has been outside of this fantastic Bloodline storyline they've had for over a year, which we talk about week after week, just like they show week after week. It's got nuance. It's still developing. Some would say it's even gotten a little stale since Sammy and KO are taken out of the equation, although I think we've talked about, it was the right decision because the story of the Bloodline is really about Jay and Roman, Jimmy and Solo and Paul playing these co-stars. I think there's been an improvement in the Judgment Day storyline with where they're going. I mean, they're still being featured week after week. Dom being a crazy heel has definitely helped them, but they each now have a little bit of purpose. And then we've got Cody. I was saying, couldn't tell you right now, and I feel like I watch the product a lot. I can't tell you what's going on with the U.S. title right now.
Well, and that's what I would say is I think that as of last night, every single title holder in WWE has some kind of story around them to varying degrees, with the exception of Austin Theory. Austin Theory has no story, and I think that again is a reflection, as we talked about, of I think the different way that Triple H perceives Austin Theory versus the way maybe Vince perceived Austin Theory. So as Triple H has become more prominent, I think the sort of reciprocal there is that Austin Theory's prominence has dropped. But if your question is, could I name 10 different storylines that are happening right now in WWE of varying levels of development? Yes. And to give you one example, like Judgment Day, that's really four storylines that are happening at once, because you have the situation with Finn and Seth, which I thought the segment they did last night was fantastic to sort of really lay out the 7-year history, and like Seth was kind of a jerk 7 years ago when Finn got hurt. So you have that. You have Damian Priest and Finn sort of having their potential tension, and Damian Priest perhaps being Money in the Bank winner. You have, of course, everything that's going on around Dom, which is now he is the top, the most over heel on Raw, challenging the most over face on Raw. And he's got that storyline going with Cody. And then, of course, you have Cody's sort of background storyline with Brock, where Brock, and admittedly, this is one that they have not developed well, at least in terms of the rationale. Brock has it in for Cody for reasons that haven't really been explained. Brock potentially stalking Cody. Cody has said, here's all the places I'm going to be. Show up anytime, anywhere. I think he shows up in London Saturday, for the record. And then as of the one thing that I would have said before last night was they've done Rhea a disservice, because I think she has really done a tremendous job, especially over the last year and a half, of not only improving, but really becoming a big star. And they really hadn't had anything for her. But this is what I like about WWE. They not only have now started to develop a story for her, but the story itself is addressing directly that criticism that I just gave. Because Becky comes up to her and is like, hey, you're the women's world champion, and you were basically just a side piece for Dom. Like, that's it? That's all you got? So that, again, kicks off a potential, whether Becky wins Money in the Bank or not, that kicks off a potential Becky and Rhea feud for right after Money in the Bank moving forward. So one thing I'll say about WWE, and I've even gotten into like SmackDown storylines and stuff, or other was on Raw, but one thing I'll say about WWE is, if you watch a 3-hour Raw, which, as discussed, I think that's too long, but if you watch a 3-hour Raw, you would be hard-pressed to find many segments over the course of that show that do not advance, develop, or start some kind of story. It's, as you said, the contrast between the two companies really has brought this into stark relief for me. their entire philosophy with booking a show is every segment has got to do something with the story one way or the other. Even a one-off match that they have that doesn't directly affect the story is used to enhance a characteristic of one of their superstars. So, for example, Dom Mysterio, I want to face an opponent of my caliber. He faces Akira Tozawa, who obviously is presented as a low-tier guy, which underscores sort of the cowardice and the sort of paper challenger type characteristic of Dom. So even stuff that is a one-off advances stories in a sort of tangential way. So anyway, I think that Triple H has really done something that Vince had really kind of lost his ability to do over the last several years, which is the week-to-week storytelling has been so good of late, and I really appreciate the fact that they are able to advance all these stories.
Okay, Kelsey, he mentioned, I think we sort of agreed to the top storylines in the company right now, without getting too much into SmackDown, Bloodline, and then this Judgment Day and the different arms of that. Is there another storyline that jumps out to you that has you just as intrigued as those two we just mentioned?
I think Bray Wyatt's storyline is very interesting. I know he's MIA right now, but I once we maybe get to talking to more Money in the Bank, I do see maybe Bray Wyatt coming back into that storyline.
This is why I have you on the show to talk Bray Wyatt. Love it. Love it. You segued, you both have said something that segues excellently into sort of my stream of conscious. Let's keep with you, Kelsey. Tom, here we go, Tom. Here's what WWE is missing right now. I'm not saying it's because of Bray, but WWE for a very long period of time, starting with The Undertaker, there has always been a nefarious, dark, sinister character somewhere lurking in WWE. It's been the Undertaker. It's been Mr. McMahon for a long period of time as this overarching threat nemesis. It was the McMahon family. Triple H would make sporadic appearances when he was the owner. And then we had Bray for years. But there is no, and the Judgment Day with Edge, we thought might have some dark tones. We thought Karrion Kross was going to have some weird, disturbing character. So just to give Bray credit, in the absence of a sensible Bray Wyatt storyline, I think what's really missing storyline wise is some threat, overarching threat that is missing. TG, what do you think about that? Do you get where I'm coming from? And I think they need that too.
I thought I did initially, but just to clarify, it sounded like you were going sort of down almost a supernatural route with guys like The Undertaker and Bray, but then you threw Mr. McMahon into it, so now I'm not entirely clear.
Not so much supernatural, but nefarious. Well, sometimes it's supernatural, but always a threat that the whole foundation can come crumbling down with something. Not to the point of maybe an invasion angle, although that has been that at times too, for good and for bad. But like some either dark character or a story that can shake the foundation of the company, and they don't have that right now. I just think they have a lot of sort of milquetoast storylines. Again, the exception of the Bloodline, which is fantastic. They're all kind of, when the people we've named so far, Judgment Day, Roman, let's get Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and Gunther on that level too. Then I think there's a big drop off right now with the product until you get to the likes of, Riddle, even LA Knight, AJ Styles. That second tier, I think, is thin and is doing what usually a third tier was doing. There's no real interest in the tag team. The Street Profits aren't dominating. The Viking Raiders, Karrion Kross, even Rey Mysterio, they're involved, but there's nothing particularly dynamic outside of those top 7 guys. And I think you used to be able to look down the card and be excited 7, 8, 9 cards deep. And I'm just not feeling it lately. But it segues into what you were talking about with Triple H's influence. Now, a lot of the chatter, we don't like to get too much into dirt sheet chatter, but a lot of talk has been about Vince has become a primary creative force on the show again. He's not necessarily ripping them up at the show up at 8:59 anymore, but he's making these changes. And after this past week, you heard some rumblings that Vince is now fully in control. And I think this sort of coincides with a backslide in which you talked about Triple H's. So is there a burgeoning Vince effect that could rear the negative consequences that we saw a couple of years ago when the product was pretty stale?
I think it's different now just because no matter what happens, something with the product is going to change, because as the merger under Endeavor comes to fruition in the next few months, even if Vince is just like, look, I'm not going to be involved in creative at all, something would change because again, we've talked about this, but you're going to have certain departments that get merged. And so the presentation at a minimum of the product is going to look different depending on whether they decide like, hey, we're kind of going to go in a third way. We're going to have something that looks a little more like UFC or looks a little more like other properties that Endeavor is involved in. So I think that there's going to be change no matter what. And I think that if it doesn't go well, regardless of how involved Vince is, the online wrestling folks will say, oh, this is Vince's fault. Like this is Vince's fingerprints. It's like, I don't think there's anything you can do about that. My suspicion is some of the stuff they're going to do is going to work. Some of the stuff they're going to do is not going to work, just like always. And it's just a matter of getting the ratio right. I honestly think, although for sure there have been instances where Vince has been more involved now than he was 6 months ago, I really think his primary focus at the moment, day to day, is on the business stuff and finishing the execution of this, of all the different logistical things that have to happen for the merger to be consummated. If people are like worried about Vince, the time to worry about Vince is going to be after that stuff is done, because he's probably very busy with that stuff. When that's fully consummated and he has like an ironclad contract and is still in a position of power, that's where you have to be worried about like, oh, is he just going to restore the status quo from a year and a half, 2 years ago? So I think right now, this is largely people who are seeing some things that maybe they don't like or are maybe a little paranoid about things changing too much. I mean, I can't remember if we talked about this on the show, but we definitely talked about it in the group chat. I think the change that he made last week, I thought was for the better. Not yesterday, but last week, where it was Ciampa was supposed to re-debut and immediately, be in a match that he wasn't going to win against Seth Rollins, which I was like, I don't think that does him any good. I think him coming back, facing The Miz, he was last associated with, getting a decisive win, that's good. So I thought that was an improvement. We talked about this a little bit, but like last night with Carmelo, I get it. It elevates him from a prominence standpoint, but man, if it's your first match on Raw and you are in a match that basically is just used to get another dude momentum for a pay-per-view match that he has, I don't think that's great. So I don't know if that was a Triple H call. I don't know if that was a Vince call, but that one I would say like, there's better ways to do this than that. But anyway, that was a long rambling answer to your question, which is, bottom line, I don't think there's been that much that has really changed. I think people who are concerned about Vince or afraid of Vince are seeing more differences than actually exist. And I think the time, if you're going to worry, if you're of that mindset, the time to worry is going to be in a few months when all that Endeavor stuff is wrapped up. And then it's like, he's just got much more time on his hands to do whatever he's going to do with it.
Well, to Kelsey's point, in a few months, Bray's going to be back, so I'll have no complaints at all, really. Kelsey, you rediscovered your love for really wrestling around WrestleMania 38 a couple of years ago. So you've been much more invested in the last 2 years of the wrestling world than maybe you had been in some of the previous. You got a lot other, you get your fingers in a lot of other pots right now. Did you follow like the last 2 years, like once you got back in, about some of this drama with the creative and Vince leaving, Vince coming back, the sale to Endeavor? We don't really have your perspective on what, some of the big change sort of last year with Vince leaving. If you saw a improvement, did it hit you? Did it hit with you more or less? I don't know how close you follow the wrestling online community. It can be pretty toxic sometimes, but want to get from your perspective in the last 2 years, like what you saw as like the sort of saga of the company through the sale.
Yeah, I guess since it's a short window since I revisited, WWE again, I was actually at Nightmare Factory when everything came up, with Vince, and that's when I was, more involved, of course, with WWE. When I heard about it, I guess I didn't have enough information to know how it affected the wrestling world. However, it just kind of was a thing that passed for me, just because I didn't know what other backstory. I didn't know how in and out he was. I know that when I believe that maybe it was January or February when things kind of surfaced, and he had left, and so I guess my take on it wouldn't be as good because the window is so small as to where I wouldn't know exactly what's going on with it.
When Vince, I guess, retired, I guess this was about a year ago, sometime in July is when he stepped away from the business, and Triple H became the head and creative. We were doing the show, and he brought back a lot of talent that had been released, a couple years prior. Your Braun Strowman came back, Gargano came back. As someone who maybe wasn't as deep into the product, did you notice any from like what you consumed and what you liked about wrestling and the product on TV? Did you sort of notice an improvement, or did you take notice when some of these guys returned that had been out for a while? I mean, Bray had the biggest return that didn't go so well, but we talked a lot about just like some of the talent that Triple H brought in to little fanfare, and then seemingly has been even more marginalized as the months have gone by. Your thoughts on that, or does anyone that you were, other than Bray, that you were excited to see come back in the last year and wish was getting more TV time?
I was excited to see, bringing up Attitude Era again, when Lita and Trish came on. Yeah. Definitely. So that's something and that was more recently, of course. So that's something that I was excited about. Will there be more to the story? I don't know. But that specifically would be something that I definitely brought back that childhood. So bringing up Vince McMahon, I was never a Vince McMahon fan because I love Stone Cold, right? So I never followed him. And so when I heard about him in the news, I'm like, oh, typical, whatever. I just wasn't a Vince McMahon fan. So that's where that comes. I didn't really follow that, but when it comes to a storyline, Lita and Trish, I mean, that doesn't exist anymore, but not saying it can't happen again.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I should have brought at the beginning of the show that now that Kelsey's sort of could be on more regularly, I told her we had to give her a handle. She had to come up with a handle. I'm EJ the Collector. We've got TG. You're the Ultimate Warrior, kind of above everything else. But week to week, you have a different handle as well. You
should explain that that's WORRIER.
Right, the Ultimate Warrior. Yeah, cheats 2 belts. We got our favorite heel and heels, Megan. So we might not assign Kelsey a handle like I was assigned one, or but it may just come organically. But it is interesting about Kelsey that you will be developing a wrestling character in your professional life in the weeks and months to come. Sometimes we don't really know. Character names kind of sometimes come out of nowhere. And you told me how you were inspired by Stone Cold and how he got his name. Share with the wrestling friends here about Stone Cold and how he got his Stone Cold Steve Austin nickname. TG, do you know this story?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, I want to hear it from Kelsey and enlighten everybody.
Yeah, and okay, so I learned the story. So Stone Cold, how did he get his name? So he brought up some names, to McMahon, some ideas, and didn't like any of the ideas at all that were given to him, the names. I don't know off the top of my head what they were.
Fang McFrost is the one I remember.
Yes.
Fang McFrost.
Yes. And
Fang,
there was like
F-A-N-G.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And McFrost. Yes. Yep. He watched this documentary, and after he watched it, the serial killer was a very cold-hearted person. So that's where he got that, okay, I want to be, cold, this cold person. And so brought that idea to the creative team, and they gave him, those names, and he didn't like them. So sat on it a little bit. At the time, he was married to, his wife was from England, and his wife is like, okay, hey, come sit down, and drink up your tea before it gets stone cold. And then she's like, that's it, Stone Cold. That's your name. And Stone Cold, he struggled to figure out what his name was. Nothing jumped at him. And so after I learned that, I'm like, okay, I'm just waiting for that moment to happen for me. Because when it comes to thinking about that, I think it's something that'll just click. Yeah, so I'm waiting for my tea moment like Stone Cold had.
Well, how it's going to happen hopefully on this podcast, and that'll be great. Yeah, we're going to talk some wrestling cheats. No worries, healing is never talking wrestling. We had WWE and NXT sort of had their own forbidden door last night because, as TG mentioned, Carmelo Hayes, NXT champion, came up and had it was really his Raw debut. Is that what they were advertising it as?
I mean, it was his first match on Raw for sure. I don't know if he's been in the crowd or in a backstage segment. I don't think so, but I could be wrong about that.
I believe I remember tweets from our pal Victor at the Wrestling Club when he went to the show in Brooklyn that Melo was on like the pre-Raw dark match. So he was making appearances, but I guess, yeah, his first time on TV. I think it's right because the WWE champ, Seth Rollins, has been down in NXT. There's been a lot of WWE vets who go down to NXT and cause problems. As we mentioned, he did go take the L last night. It was kind of expected, and it was we can have our opinions. I think anytime you bring someone out who's probably going to be a torch carrier for 5 years, no one's going to remember his debut. John Cena didn't have his debut against Kurt Angle, or had he already been? He'd already been a little established. So I don't know how damaging it's going to be, and I don't know. He's probably facing Baron Corbin right now. Tonight was that battle. We're not doing a live look in. If you wanted to jumpstart Baron Corbin's career back, you give him the NXT title. There is precedent for that. Dolph Ziggler has been NXT champion. Charlotte Flair has been NXT champion.
Would you say that Dolph Ziggler winning the NXT title jump-started his career again?
He's a little different just because his career has never needed jump-starting. I mean, he is that Ford F-150 engine from the 50s with 650,000 miles on it that still turns over every single time. I saw someone talk about Dolph Ziggler. There is perhaps been no one. I like to think if there is an Attitude Era equivalent of someone who is established, you can put them at the bottom of the card, in the middle of the card. If your main event star is hurt, you can hotshot Ziggler to a main event program, no problem. They have done that with him for 15, 20 years. Dolph Ziggler's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Is there a workhorse equivalent of Dolph Ziggler from another period of time? Someone like Tito Santana, that guy's a scumbag. But anyway, Tito Santana back in the day, he was a title holder. He was always in the Survivor Series alongside Hulk Hogan, but he was never someone that was going to get a world title run. Dolph Ziggler's had a world title run. Who is latter years Dolph Ziggler? Just the ultimate workhorse.
Are we done talking about Baron Corbin, or we can go back to that?
We will get back to that. This is Stream of Consciousness podcast, folks. We're going to jump around.
I mean, in terms of in-ring work, Chad Gable is just spectacular.
Scott Hall was that person too, I think, back in the day, although with a much higher caliber.
I mean, higher caliber in terms of where they are on the card. I think, and Chad Gable obviously hasn't had the singles success in kayfabe that Dolph Ziggler had, but every time Chad Gable wrestles, I enjoy watching it just because he's just really, really, really strong.
Kelsey, if you get a name, toss it out. But we'll keep talking about Baron Corbin also. Mm-hmm. Would you want to see him take the title off Melo tonight?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Kelsey, do you have an opinion about it?
No, I wouldn't. I don't want him to. Yeah.
Because you don't want to see him as champion, or you don't think Melo is ready to take a next step yet?
I think Melo can ease his way, maybe into it, slow and steady. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed actually from your Grabo show as we open NXT cards, I can rattle off a dozen NXT talents, but majority of the time when we're going through those cards, it is the first time I'm hearing a lot of those names. I'm not a regular week-to-week watcher. Mel is definitely the top, if not the top star in NXT. But there is not a rich, deep pool of name talent that will be the standard bearers in the years to come. TGG, I bet you disagree with that point, but you don't even consume NXT really. The fact that there's not really a ton of names jumping out outside your Mellows, outside your Pretty Deadlies who have recently jumped the roster.
I mean, in fairness, though, I think, and you just said it, I think that it's tough to get a read on NXT right now just because they just had the draft 2 months ago-ish. So they've, harvested a crop of NXT talent. So there's got to be some time for the next group of NXT stars to kind of step up. So, I mean, the system works. I mean, they've done a tremendous job. And that's one thing that we've talked about. One of the differences between, I think, AEW and WWE that's an advantage for WWE is, at least as of right now, AEW doesn't really have a viable sort of developmental program in the same way that WWE does, where they have a TV show on USA that they can go on and get them ready to move up to Raw or SmackDown. So
let's talk about SmackDown now for a second. The Bloodline dominates that TV show right now. Who is the main challenger for the US title right now? And is it even being defended on Saturday?
Not that I'm aware of, but maybe that'll change Friday. But
is that a problem that a wrestling podcast can't talk more about their show outside of the Bloodline storyline?
Well, I mean, I think there's other good things on SmackDown. I just think this is a problem that is specific to Austin Theory, and it's not an accident. I mean, I think it is an intentional decision that they have made that he's not being prioritized right now. So,
who's jumping out on SmackDown for you, Kelsey? Right. I feel the same way.
Obvious blood. I mean, I don't want to answer that. You're just repeating yourself and people. So yeah.
Where's Omos been? He was hot for a couple of weeks. LA Knight's a good example. LA Knight might be your biggest star. So Cheats is saying that Austin is a star. I think he under certain direction. He was definitely on his way. He was repackaged much better when he lost the camera and the selfies. He was starting being taken seriously. He had this mean streak, but Are they waiting for someone to come back from injury? Bobby Lashley has been sort of MIA. Sheamus has even taken a couple of notches down on the card. You know, we're without Drew McIntyre, but I think he's on Raw actually. But you know, the Bloodline storyline has just gotten so much attention that I think some of these subplots on SmackDown, it kind of goes back to my point about it sort of being a little vanilla right now. Like we're sort of struggling to come up with dynamic storylines that are sticking with us days after they're happening.
I mean, speak for yourself. I can rattle off several from.
Let's hear it. Let bring some on.
Okay. Number one, you've got the issue with Charlotte Flair comes back. Bianca is justifiably upset because she's like, Charlotte, where did you come from? And now you've got Bianca wants a rematch with Asuka. Asuka and Charlotte are going to wrestle on Friday night. Who knows what that's going to set up for Saturday, if anything, but that's going to be, you know, is a big story involving arguably they're the two. I mean, it gets tough because you got to put Becky in that upper echelon, but Bianca has been the most pushed woman on their roster for the last year. And then you have Charlotte, who's been the most pushed of the last 5 years, year in and year out. So that to me is a big deal. I think you also have seen the beginnings of a reinvestment in their tag team division. I think that, you know, what's really unfortunate is and you touched on earlier, what's happened to the Street Profits. The Street Profits, it feels like they are just in a holding pattern until something is going to happen. Either they're going to, when they take the titles off of Owens and Zayn and it becomes more like a regular like tag division again, or they pull the trigger on a split with those guys. But whatever it is, they're lost in the shuffle, which is not great. But I think that, you know, certainly since Pretty Deadly has come up, they have been pushed hard, featured, and I think that is going to be a big deal for them to be able to wrestle in London for the titles. The crowd reaction is going to be really interesting because they are obviously pure heels, and that's how they're being presented, and they are not going to get, I don't think, a heel reaction in London. I think the crowd will like both teams, but and then I think with Lashley, that again is a strategic decision because I think once whatever happens with the Bloodline, like civil war gets resolved, I think Lashley is the next obvious main challenger for Roman. I think after this because those guys have been kept apart at least for a year plus. So I think that they'll kind of revitalize that. I mean, that's three things off the top of my head. I'm sure there's other stuff that I'm not thinking of right now. I mean, you also have like, for example, the stuff that is sort of intersecting with the women's Money in the Bank match, which is Bayley and Io Sky are both in the match together. There's been sort of a light teasing of not dissension per se with Damage Control, but like the beginnings of, are they really kind of working in tandem anymore? What's going to happen? So I think that's going to be a big storyline that comes out of Saturday. I think, you know, the split that I've thought was coming a while ago will come to fruition in the weeks following. The pay-per-view, I think maybe they're just waiting on Dakota Kai to be available again to maybe be a part of that, but we'll see.
Kelsey, did they teach you like tag team wrestling at the Nightmare Academy? Is there a different philosophy of singles wrestling versus in tag team wrestling when you're training?
No, I mean, we didn't do too much tag team. No, not just two people. You know, we tag each other in, but that's multiple people. But no, we never worked on tag teams. Just singles. Yeah.
The tag team division, you know, I would understand if they feel confident that it's in good hands because they have someone with the caliber of Ronda Rousey. Tom and I have shared our opinions on Ronda Rousey for months. We want to get Kelsey, Ronda Rousey, like good for wrestling, indifferent. Our sort of stance has been sort of for a while, like she has not dramatically improved her in-ring skills and she doesn't seem very comfortable in front of a microphone, in front of a camera either. But I want to see if you have a different perspective on Ronda Rousey and her place in WWE.
When she first came into the scene, there's a pop She wasn't really around as much. Coming back, I just kind of see her as there. Doesn't stick out to me at all. More in the beginning, she definitely stuck out more, but coming back around, she really doesn't stick out to me anymore.
It's not, and I wouldn't put the blame entirely on her. Well,
No.
she hasn't sunk, I would say, but I think those around her have really risen, and Rhea and especially Bianca have really raised that tide of women's wrestlers that makes the attraction of Ronda good, but it also goes to show you got to have some serious chops too. Something that she didn't drastically. Has your opinion on Ronda changed, Tom, recently? Now that she's sort of gotten,
it's strange because I think when she first came in, it was much like when Brock came back, because he of course had established himself in front of this new UFC audience. He comes back to WWE, and that is a major plus for them. And with Ronda Rousey, she was arguably like an even bigger, sort of draw in terms of mainstream attention. And the fact that she went to WWE, I was like, wow, that's going to be a big deal for them. And what's weird about it is, whereas Brock, who in fairness to him, of course, he had the WWE background going before, so he knew the ropes, no pun intended. With Ronda, it's almost like she started out up here and sort of fell to the level. As Kelsey said, she's just sort of there now, whereas Brock kind of elevated other people as a more traditional wrestler who was a big star would be able to do. The biggest thing with Ronda, I think the biggest mistake they made with her is they should have given her some, whether it was pairing her with Paul Heyman or given her a mouthpiece. Because I think if you just keep her, her intensity is amazing. She's obviously legitimate, incredible athlete. So all that stuff, like her being dangerous and again, sort of akin to Brock, I think that was all solid. I think the fact that I'll say this about her. The thing that I think makes it hard for her to connect with the audience is there is sort of a fine line between presenting yourself as someone who is, let's say, a heel who thinks you're better than everyone else, and someone who legitimately maybe thinks that the pro wrestling industry is beneath you. And she has, that line has been a little blurry at times with her, where she has said and done things that seem to intimate that she really does not think much of professional wrestling as an endeavor. And that is just, nothing will kill you faster, I think, with a real wrestling audience than for people to believe that you have contempt for the sport. And I think there have been moments when she has drifted into that territory, and maybe it was a work, but I think her lack of sort of polish made it difficult for the audience to understand that it was a character, if it was that, and maybe it wasn't. So that's been the challenge, I think, for her.
I think it's not a character, and I think it contributes to maybe why she didn't have more sustained mainstream success, because I think she did have maybe a ego, or just felt like she really was the most important thing, and things like, maybe some of there weren't enough offers coming her way. The offers that were coming her way, she thought were beneath her, or just her improvisational acting chops weren't there. And you have to be a good actor to be a professional wrestler too. So I think that's also been a miss with her too. Yeah, but her and Shayna, who are tight, they have a good run right now, and it will be interesting if they ever want to turn them on each other. People have talked about Shayna and Ronda just because of their MMA backgrounds, that and their friendship, that's sort of been that would one time was a dream WrestleMania match for each other. Now it would be a good feature when they finally turn, but it doesn't. Neither one of them sort of, I think, are high enough on the card to warrant, that's not two that would main event a pay-per-view, where there are plenty of women on that roster that absolutely have and can main event a pay-per-view.
And it's funny because Ronda, when she first came in, I think correctly and understandably, was sort of much in the same way that they have presented and protected Cody. Like, she was pretty much always near or at the top of the card, and that has definitely, obviously changed in the last year and a half to 2 years.
No doubt about it. We got so much into, we're kind of getting close to the end. We got so much into Money in the Bank last week. We gave our predictions, but I kind of want to know, how is that show going to go off the air this Saturday evening? Starts in the afternoon. Again, so good. There's nothing in the way Saturday in the afternoon. You can chill. You can still go out Saturday night. You don't got to be worrying about looking at your phone, looking at updates. Here's a couple of scenarios of how it could go off the air. It's main eventing with the Civil War, obviously. I think this. I was gonna say this could be the first time in a few years that Roman takes a pin, because it's not for any of his titles. So taking a pin would be a very large step in this story, because he has not eaten a pin since, at this point, could be our new NXT champion.
Fair and square.
It could have done it by now. I have not turned on the USA Network as of yet. Having Jay pin Roman would be a real coup, and really pop that, and pop this, making this almost like one of the big four pay-per-views. They're certainly trying to build it up, this to be like one of those. Or, you can, if you want the Usos to win, Solo has taken pins by now, so he could definitely lose. Or you could stack the odds even more and have Roman standing tall. Maybe it was a fluke win. Maybe Solo did all the dirty work, and Roman was just there to spear him at the end and get the win. And that music plays just like it has pay-per-view after pay-per-view after pay-per-view in the last few years. Kelsey, which of those two options or something different do you want to see go off to end the show on Saturday evening?
Okay, so it could go like a few ways. I don't see how the match will end, but maybe there's something where Solo hits Roman, maybe it's an accident or something happens. So now the bloodline's really broken up. Now Solo Sikoa's out. He's not with, Roman. Now it's just Roman. It's just Roman and Paul, right? Maybe Paul has a moment. Maybe Heyman has a moment where he's like, oh, maybe I need to go with the bloodline with the Usos and Solo. And now it's just Roman. But, Paul will probably go back to Roman. And then who comes out? Bray Wyatt. Because Bray and Roman have a history.
Cheats. I did not pay her or coach her about this. She is just as big a Bray Wyatt fan as I am. I love this. Kelsey, you have no idea. I've been getting dragged for months about how much I want Bray Wyatt back and how much he is the ultimate savior. This has been totally unsolicited. It's amazing. Bray Wyatt returns in London at the O2 Arena. I mean, only in my most intense dreams, I guess.
Right. I know. And just, him and Roman have that history. I believe it was back in 2020, and Roman really started his reign after that. So I don't know.
The truth is, lights going out and Bray Wyatt. I don't. Who would care if he was the Fiend, Uncle Howdy? It wouldn't matter. TG, this is true. That would get a bigger pop than Jay pinning Roman Reigns. It would.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that. I don't think that I think the median wrestling fan and the median fan who's in that arena is more invested in this story than they are like Bray Wyatt randomly returning after being gone for however many months.
You may be right. I don't know. Well, how do you want to see that end, or how do you predict it's going to end?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that this is going to be a big deal. I think we all. I know Kelsey said this. I can't remember, Ellie, if you agreed with this, but I think Kelsey and I definitely said we think the Usos are going to win.
Mm-hmm. I think the Usos are going to win too.
And I think potentially this is Roman takes his first pin in 3+ years. And I think that, as you said, titles aren't on the line. He can take a pin here. It would be a huge deal for Jay to pin him, and then sets up down the road what I have thought is always going to be the culmination of the Bloodline storyline. Ultimately will be Roman versus Jay. Doesn't necessarily mean Roman's going to lose. I still think they're going to let him pass Hulk Hogan, and he probably doesn't lose the titles until WrestleMania. But who knows? But I think this is like the first step in sort of that path. So I think Jay pins him. I don't think there's going to be like a quick cash in by whoever wins Money in the Bank for a couple of reasons. One, because I think Damian Priest. Now I'm sort of convinced it's Damian Priest. But two, you'd be dumb to cash in on Roman with Solo there. I mean, that would, strategically, I would be like, this doesn't make sense. Don't do this. But we'll see.
Roman has to. I mean, this again. They had Asuka and Rhea on 2 different programs holding the other titles for months, and no one noticed. Hogan's title reign goes well past WrestleMania next year. Apparently,
I don't think so, because I think Roman's over 1,000, and
I thought Hogan was.
I don't know. Maybe you're right.
I thought Hogan was like at 1,500 or something like that. So that's.
But I'll look it up.
Yeah. So as we're coming to the end here, Money in the Bank's always exciting.
1474, so it would have to go past WrestleMania. So maybe I don't know. Maybe
doesn't mean Roman's not going to win next year. I mean, this has been a clear plan.
4 in a row. That would be tough.
I mean,
not impossible.
WWE has clearly is marketing Roman as this next person. Hogan, Austin, Cena, Reigns. Like that's sort of where we're talking about here. That wasn't always probably in the plans, but it clearly is now.
And let's just be clear. If The Rock had not decided to go to Hollywood, he would have been basically the champ for probably 10 years. I mean, he could have been the champ as long as he wanted to if he had stuck around. And that, I'm not saying none of us ever would have heard of John Cena. He still would have been a big star. But John Cena's career trajectory is in part dependent on the fact that you had the guy who went on to be the biggest star outside of the business decides to leave the business when he's still very much in his prime. And if he doesn't make that choice, I mean, they would love to have him as part of the company like now, like at his age. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Favorite Rock movie, Tom?
Wow, great question.
Kelsey, think of yours.
Give me a second to think.
Kelsey, you got one jumping out? Favorite Rock movie? Honestly, his 15 minutes in the beginning of The Other Guys with Sam Jackson was fantastic.
I don't even know if it was 15 minutes, but yeah.
Not 10 minutes. I mean, that was terrific. I'm not a huge fan of the Fast and Furious movies.
I've never seen any of them.
What was the one he did not early in his career? He didn't do Not Walking Tall, but the one he did with.
Yeah, he did Walking
Tall. But the one with Sean William Scott where they were the treasure hunters.
Rundown.
That was a good movie. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that movie. Kelsey, you got a favorite Rock movie?
Let's see. I don't watch a ton of movies. However, there was a recent one that just came out, maybe Red Notice.
Oh, Red Notice, yeah.
Yeah, I actually watched it with a few other wrestlers at the Nightmare Factory. So that's the most recent one that I've watched. Otherwise,
Tooth Fairy,
Jumanji was funny.
Jumanji's funny. Tooth Fairy.
I don't know if it's my favorite of his, but I will say this: Black Adam wasn't bad. I don't know why the reviews were so bad. I was like, I don't know what people wanted out of that movie who went into it and were disappointed. I thought he did well. I thought he was good. I thought the story was, solid. That was weird to me. I don't get what that was about. But anyway, I enjoyed that a lot. So I saw Rampage in a theater.
Oof.
Theater.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof. I have almost enjoyed some of Cena's movies more than The Rock's. The Peacemaker TV series was fantastic. If you didn't,
I didn't love it. I
didn't love it.
Honest. It was a little too. We don't. That's a whole other conversation. I'm a snob when it comes to that stuff. So.
And Kelsey, not a big movie buff.
I can't even remember the last movie I watched. Yeah, like fully watched. So
We're gonna learn more about Kelsey as the weeks go by. She's now gonna her attendance is now pretty much expected / mandatory going forward, like it is with Tom's. I hope you're enjoying yourself, Kelsey. We love having you on.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. I love, opening up the topics. It's questions I haven't been asked myself, so it gets my brain moving in a different way. So I love it.
Great. TG, I can always count on you. I appreciate it. Let's toss our socials out. Let's try to get some friends who are into trading cards from the Graybo show to come join the conversation over here. So Kelsey, start us off. Give us Graybo's socials, your socials, whatever you want to share that people can kind of find you online and start this community up.
Yeah, you can find me on Graybo's Sports Cards. You can look that up on Instagram, on Facebook. Graybo Sports Cards, we are partnered with Drip. So you can find me on Drip through Graybo's, and that's on Monday nights at 8 p.m. So we rip wrestling cards and we watch Raw. And so that's with Graybo's. So Graybo Sports Cards. And then as far as my socials, Kelsey Ray is my Facebook, and Instagram I'm probably on the most, if any. And that's it's me.Kelsey. And that's it for those.
TG, your axis of ego, but like, where do you want people to engage with you on Twitter? Want to give out your office number so people can call you?
That presumes that I want people to engage with me.
You do not want people to engage with you. I know that.
No, I mean, what's the point, really?
Engage with us at WCWF Pod on YouTube and on Facebook. We have a channel and a Facebook group, Wrestling Chat with Friends. If you like us, tell a friend, share us. Spread it around. We're gonna, we post. We don't live tweet the shows so much, but we'd like to do more of that. We live tweet pay-per-views a lot. Cheats and our favorite heel and heels, Megan and I, did a lot of live tweeting Sunday on Forbidden Door, and we'll go forward. We will be here Thursday to talk AEW. Heels might be here. We might have some guests. Who knows? And Cheats will be around the other side of the glass hosting that show too, and I'll be there. We usually count it out on the Thursday show, but on Tuesday, Kelsey, you put me in a finishing hold. I'm tapping out. That's all I got. So I'm EJ the Collector. We got Kelsey, TG. We'll see you next week.